we at BW Businessworld and BW Hotelier have been active throughout the last 2 years in terms of keeping engaged with the community of business leaders and business communities and the policymakers. And the PLI scheme from the government of India was welcomed when it was launched. So today we look at how effective it has been, what's working in the PLI scheme, what's can be better. And we couldn't have had a better panel than what we've assembled today to discuss this. Let me briefly kind of acknowledge their presence and welcome them as is customary. First of all, Mr. Agrawal, thank you for joining us, and we're grateful to you for your presence. Mr. Jawa, thank you for being here. Mr. Nangia, thank you for being here. Mr. Gurmeet Singh Sethi, who's the CMD of Hitachi, thank you for being here. Mr. CP Mukundan Menon, thank you for being here. All of you who are on this broadcast, my senior colleague and CEO, Mr. Bhuvanesh, Khanna, and my editorial colleagues who've joined the broadcast and are covering it, all the audiences. We know after 23 months of the pandemic, and hopefully, I'm hoping we are in a post-pandemic era and we don't have to see the kind of time we saw in the last 24 months, 23 months. And the government was proactive all along to be able to bring measures which helped deal with the pain of COVID, took the new realities into account, and gave some kind of incentive to build an Atma Nirbhar Bharat, because the COVID disrupted supply chains. And you know what has happened over the last 12 days, especially last 6 days of the war that Russia has unfolded on Ukraine, the impact on supply chains is again evident. So it necessitates that we build a stronger India in terms of manufacturing and build those capabilities. However, money intensive, focus incentive, it is, and in some cases it is painful also, where we are used to a certain price point when we import. So can we build that in the short term? So in the short term, there may be a little negative. So the government of India brought in the PLI to be able to deal with that and incentivize. Again, there have been a lot of suggestions that it should not just be on the parts. It should also, it should be fully comprehensive and not deal with only a couple of aspects that it's dealt with. I'm sure the government and the policymakers will take cognizance. The PLI has been utilized, the PLI scheme has been utilized, and most of or all of the people on this panel have welcomed the PLI. I would say that as most policies of the government have to be concurrent and dynamic with the environment, I'm sure the PLI policy had a certain specific provisions which deals with the pandemic. As the pandemic goes away, maybe there is a provision and a policy tweak to be able to make it more relevant to the future. That's what I would say. And I will leave it to Mr. Khanna, Mr. Nangia, Mr. Gurmeet Singh Sethi, Mr. Menon, and Mr. Jawa to be able to take it forward. I just want to say that in the last 23 months, Businessworld has been very active digitally, virtually, and been able to serve the 25 communities. Today, while we are doing this under the aegis of BW Businessworld and BW Hotelier, and Hotelier in the last 7 years has become the #1 community in every qualitative and quantitative parameter, thanks to Mr. Khanna and his team's great work. But we've been able to build a #1 community at the cusp of the legal world and the business world, called the BW Legal World. We've been able to build the education community, a defense community, a well-being community, a healthcare community, while we focus on the B2C aspect of the Business World magazine and the Business World site, which is businessworld.in. We've been able to do almost 90 large format events virtually. And over the last 4 weeks, we brought back our physical events. So we look forward to seeing you. I just want to mention, because we are talking of PLI and business, I also want to tell you that in March, and we will also launch the India's most sustainable companies ranking for the 2nd year. And we are doing it through a physical event, and hopefully the environment minister will be there. In fact, the event was in Jan, and because the environment minister has been busy with the work, both at the party level, at his ministry level. He has multiple ministries. He also has, and he had a wedding in the family. So hopefully the environment minister will be there and be able to have a conversation with all the stakeholders. It's a definitive ranking of India's top 500 companies on sustainability, on their sustainability initiatives. And it is done in partnership with Sustain Labs Paris. And this is the second year, so we have lots of, and India's top 200 companies had participated voluntarily. It is a free ranking. We have not charged money for it. We believe that sustainability will also play a large role in making India Atmanirbhar. So with these words, I'll hand it back to Mr. Khanna and look forward to the conversations very keenly. Thank you, Mr. Khanna, and thank to all of you, especially Mr. Agrawal, Mr. Jawa, Mr. Menon, Mr. Sethi, and Mr. Nangia. Back to you, Mr. Khanna.
Thank you, Dr. Batra. This show is not just important for India and the industry. Years down, when we shall look back, the steps taken by the Government of India and by the DPIIT under the charge of Shri Anil Agrawal, and all that is discussed here today will come in so valuable and handy. This show is live on our platforms and our social media, be it BW businessworld.in or bwhotelier.com. Be there and on our social media, you'll see the live feed. Permit me to introduce the august panel of speakers today. Let me begin with Shri Anil Agrawal. Shri Anil Agrawal started as a software engineer in 1984 by writing the civil engineering application software. Subsequently, he joined the IPS in 1988, the Indian Police Service, and was allotted to the Uttar Pradesh cadre. He is currently serving as the Additional Secretary to the Government of India in the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, which we call the DPIIT. Besides implementing the PLI scheme for white goods, read air conditioners and LED, with an outlay of over rupees 6,238 crores, he has handled some of the flagship schemes of government, such as the Startup India, e-commerce, internal trade, several industrial sectors, and international cooperation with select geographies. He's been a pioneer in major regulatory reforms, including resolution of the angel tax issue for startups and open network for digital commerce for democratizing e-commerce. Welcome to the show, Mr. Agrawal, once again. Shri Kamalji Jawa. Shri Kamalji Jawa is the Chairman and Managing Director of Daikin Air Conditioning India Private Limited and also the President of RAMA. RAMA is the body which is, the full form is Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Manufacturer Associations. He is a veteran of the air conditioning industry with over 4 decades of experience. His successful CSR initiative focused on training and learning has come to be named as Daikin Center for Excellence. He's the current chairman of the CIA for Delhi State. Welcome, Mr. Jawa. Shri Gurmeet Singh Sethi. Shri Gurmeet Singh Sethi is the chairman and managing director of Johnson Controls-Hitachi Air Conditioning Limited, an industry veteran of over 33 years with diversified experience in various sectors, diverse such as FMCG and consumer durables. He's been the president for RAMA for 2 terms in 2016 to 2018, and then from 2018 to 2020. He's been president of RAMA he's also served as the vice president North Region for SIAMA. Shri Mukundan Menon. Mr. Menon is the president and CEO of Blue Star Limited. He's also the director in Blue Star Climatech Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of Blue Star. He's also the vice president for RAMA, along with Mr. Jawa. He serves on the body. With over 35 years of management experience, he's acknowledged for his strategic understanding of the Indian market opportunity and for operational experience to enter new markets. I now come to my good friend Rakesh Nangia. Mr. Nangia is the chairman of Nangia Andersen Limited, LLP. Rakesh is a well-known chartered accountant and corporate international tax specialist with over 40 years of experience behind him. He advises Fortune 500 and multinational companies and large Indian business houses. He also has extensive experience in FDI, business reorganization, cross-border tax restructuring, and handling any tax controversy, I like the word controversy, across a range of subsectors. Dr. Anurag Batra, sorry, I'm rushing it up. I want to cover up some time. Dr. Anurag Batra is a serial entrepreneur, a media mogul, and an author, and also an angel investor. He also is a TV show host, that's a long list, and a full-time dreamer who believes anything you believe in deeply manifests itself in reality. Dr. Batra is the founder and editor-in-chief for Exchange for Media and manages several big media brands that he has created from scratch under his aegis. Dr. Batra is the chairman and managing director of BW Businessworld, which he acquired in late 2013. BW Businessworld is in its 41st year of publication. That's quite a rush. Now let me bring in my good friend, Mr. Kanwalji Jawa, to take over the show. His opening address shall set the tone and tenor for this session. Mr. Jawa, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhuvanesh Khanna. Thank you, Mr. Batra. Shri Anil Agrawal ji, Additional Secretary, DPIT, and the architect of PLI scheme, I call him. My fellow colleagues from the industry, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure in stating that this webinar could not have come at a better moment than this. India is poised for attaining greater heights, and we have to make the most of it, given the kind of support that Government of India has been conceiving of and coming out with appropriate schemes that are industry friendly. So let me start the presentations today with a brief background. Next slide, please. By way of recapitulation, let me bring before the August gathering chronologically the conceptualization and finalization of this PLI scheme as we all know about it today. Our Honorable Prime Minister announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan with a stimulus package worth 15% of India's GDP. Niti Aayog and DPIT have led that mission. Initially, 3 industries were identified as the sunrise industries: air conditioning, leather industry, and furniture industry. Well, in association with the FICCI, a report was prepared on the growth of these industries in the next 10 years and prospects to India in terms of generating revenue and employment was given to DPIT. Regarding air conditioning industry, the report highlighted more than 5 times growth of the air conditioning manufacturing in India in the next 10 years. Next slide, please. Now, coming to PLI scheme specifically, it must be acknowledged that DPIT, which is led by Mr. Anil Agrawal, working at a great speed, announced production-linked incentive scheme for 13 key industries, white goods, AC being one of them. The outlay was estimated to be over 2 lakh crore over the next 5 to 7 years was the scheme period. This was done with a view to primarily boost Make in India and push self-reliance in the manufacturing sector. The government intended to spur production of goods that the country sees as necessary for social good, taxes, and employment generation. For air conditioning sector, PLI rollout was to the tune of over 6,200 crores to boost local manufacturing of air conditioners and LED lights. Out of this, we all know by now that estimated amount air conditioning industry is around 5,000 crore. It has been estimated that this will generate additional employment till 2030 to almost 300,000 people. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to now touch upon the big picture in the air conditioning market. We anticipate that the air conditioning industry would in phase of high growth till 2030, with a total potential domestic demand exceeding 24 million units and the potential of exports of almost 16 million finished air conditioners, thus increasing the share of global exports from current 0.5% to 16% by 2030. Assuming a growth of minimum 10% over year on basis post 2029, the market is estimated to reach the size of INR 1,750 billion by FY35. Friends, the estimates of India GDP growth by various national and international organizations, they all point out to be in the range of 9% plus, even in the midst of pandemic that has hit the entire world hard. With the support provided by the government at the right time, we from the refrigeration air conditioner manufacturer industry have to make the most of this opportunity. Next slide, please. Staying on the big picture, when we look at our AC industry as compared to others, the air conditioning penetration in the Indian market is estimated to be around 5% only, which indicates a high ceiling for growth as compared to China, where it is 87% penetration and the world is having 60% penetration. So you can see here the growth potential. While also the per capita GDP and purchasing power in India have increased 15 times in the last few years, and HVAC system once considered a luxury are now within the reach of the wider market. There is a rapidly increasing population and urbanization, and with the demographic shifts leading to more nuclear families. Also, the construction industry is expected to reach $1.4 trillion by 2025, with the real estate projected to reach over 1 trillion by 2030. Constructions of 100 smart cities is developing new demand clusters for air conditioning in India. The government has launched several demand boosting schemes like Atma Nirbhar Bharat and Gati Shakti, along with the other government initiatives like setting up of manufacturing clusters, incentivizing R&D and large infrastructure development projects, etc., etc. The government has also supported endeavors to build India into a manufacturing and export hub through visionary leadership and the initiatives like PLI, which directly gives a boost to industry. Next slide, please. As seen on the next slide, the government has supported these endeavors to build India into a manufacturing and export hub through visionary leadership and again initiatives like PLI, which directly gives a boost to the industry. Next slide, please. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that government has taken pains to conceptualize this PLI scheme with the aid on ground inputs. As you can see from the pictures of Mr. Anil Agarwal present here today, that there has been a concentrated effort to understand the capability, the capacity, and the process in the industry through deep dive studies. Next slide, please. Now, these are some of the glimpses of various discussions held during roundtable conferences, which gave valuable insight into the scheme. This was heard openly and in a very transparent way. Next slide, please. These are the key parameters of PLI scheme that was the result of many deliberation glimpsed in previous slides. Well, I'll not go into the details of the PLI scheme as the same is known to us, and I will instead say that ball has started rolling, led by DPIT. The industry is fortunate that architect of the scheme is present himself to listen to the views of industry members. Next slide, please. Friends, in closing, I'd like to state that today India is in the same position that China was approximately 20 years ago, and Thailand maybe about 10 to 12 years ago. And as our Prime Minister rightly said, yahi samay hai, sahi samay hai. You couldn't have been at a better place than this with this kind of approach which the government has taken towards our industry. With concerted efforts from the government, with industry, Jugalbandi, if Thailand has become today the second highest exporters after China, with the support from the present management from the government of India, the industry aspires to grow and help establish India as the manufacturing hub for the world. While the industry has already taken several steps to realize this ambition of the government, certain more actions are required to be undertaken, and today's webinar hopefully will help us to identify those steps that are needed to be taken moving forwards. This completes my section, and thank you for your time. Over to you, Bhuvanesh ji.
Thank you, Mr. Jawa. You set the context for the show, the tone. Now, without wasting much time, let's get into the important part of the session by bringing in, like you said, the architect of the PLI. Over to Shri Anil Agrawal. Mr. Agrawal, your time now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khanna. Thank you, Mr. Jawa, Mr. Sethi, Mr. Nangia, Dr. Batraa. It is indeed a privilege and an honor to be part of such an illustrious panel on such an important topic. I must thank Mr. Jawa for some very kind words that he's spoken about me, which I actually don't deserve. We are led by a government which is committed to taking all necessary steps to make India truly Atmanirbhar. As part of the Make in India initiative, government has taken a number of steps. One of the most significant steps has been conceptualization of this production-linked incentive scheme. And you know, this has become a cornerstone of our efforts to enhance global quality manufacturing in India. The way these schemes are getting conceptualized is a case study on how government and industry have collaborated with each other, walked in tandem with each other, understood each other's requirements, trusted each other, and then formulated the scheme. Goes across the different sectors. And the response of the industry has been tremendous. If you look at any of the schemes which have been implemented across 13 sectors, we have 13 PLI schemes where the government has announced a total incentive about 1,97,000 crores over a period of 5 to 7 years. Early results for those schemes which have been implemented early are already visible. You already have enhanced manufacturing of mobile phones, electronic devices, laptops. All those schemes were implemented early. Now is the time when we are looking at the results of the second tranche of the PLI schemes. And I'm extremely happy to see the results that are there for the air conditioning and LED sectors. We have had a very, very dynamic, very, very close kind of relationship with the industry, right from the formulation stage. And we had very, very forthright dialogues. We said, this is possible. Industry said, we want this. We said, this is not possible. So we have been calibrating our requirements and our scheme giveaways so that we trust each other. However, and then we create a system where things are done in a smooth manner. So, you know, when you look at this particular scheme, I had the benefit of experience of some of the stalwarts like Mr. Jawa. Entire RAMA and the air conditioning industry helped us with a whole lot of information that we wanted. After all, public policy making is something where we need a lot of data to take ourselves to the right course. There are, there are differences of opinions at times, and you need the right opinions. You need the right data. You need the right opinions. And I'm extremely thankful to the industry for listening to many times my unreasonable requests with the timelines, the short timelines that we used to give them. That I want this within 24 hours, and I want this within 36 hours, and I want this by the evening today. I want this by the morning today, tomorrow. Now that is the kind of, symbiotic relationship that this government has developed with the industry today. That characterizes this implementation of the PLI scheme broadly. And that is what is the USP of this particular scheme. If I were to say this, maybe the credibility would not be so much. But when industry speaks something like this, then it is actually a matter of satisfaction for all of us. This, we've had, when we started, that was 2020, late 2020. Within a period of 1 year, we were already done with approvals, with applications, and today we have already started investments. There are 42 companies investing into ACs and LEDs across the country, more than 50 locations. And as of December 31st, the data that we have, an investment of 370 crores has already been reported by them. So the scheme is well into its functioning. We had given an option of a gestation period where either you take it as 31st of March 2022 or you take it as 31st of March 2023. Almost half of the companies took the first year as the gestation period, that is March 22. Rest of them are getting it because there are more investments, larger number of capital goods to be installed. That is going into 23. And all the companies that had committed investments in the current financial year are well on course to achieve their commitments. This has been a tremendously satisfying experience. We are also open to the dynamic requirements of the industry. Dr. Batra said, we want PLI on the whole of this thing, the finished goods. We've had a lot of debate on that. And then we decided that we are not acceding to this request, and we will only get into the components. And today, there were reports, there were feelings that this scheme is failed just because we have not gotten into the finished goods. The applications have proved otherwise. And we now, in fact, today, Mr. Jawa will bear me out that those who have not applied for the scheme are now telling us, please open the scheme window for once. There is still time and we still want to get on board. And let me tell you, we are seriously considering that request. That is the success of this particular scheme. Open to dynamic changes in the situation. We've, beyond the PLI scheme for air conditioning sector, we've also taken some policy measures to control imports, and that has tremendously helped the industry. Similar is the story for the LED component of this. The presentation that Mr. Jawa showed, some of the slides, they said we want to take manufacturing from 16,000 crores to 65 crores by 2029. And the figures that we have in our applications, they're saying that we are going to be in the incremental production of components only is going to be about 81,000 crores over a period of 7 years. Now that itself shows where we are and where we are heading. The best thing about this is, and you must look at the overall context. Now we've just signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with UAE. Now, this is a tremendous opportunity for global companies to manufacture in India and take the route of UAE to capture the global markets like Africa and other places where, you know, the geoclimatic conditions are quite similar to India. Technically, our companies are easily the best. And when we think of exporting from here, you need to look at the quality requirements of those very countries, the regulatory requirement of those countries, and manufacturing here have stood up to the challenge. They've started exporting. I'm extremely happy to see some of the conversations around how do we enhance exports, even when, you know, the gestation period of this scheme is yet to be over. This is extremely encouraging. Government is open to all the suggestions. We have a very good connect with the industry, and we are looking at all the feedback every time to see how the policy needs to be nuanced for effective implementation. For having me here, and thank you very much for this very enlightening session. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Agrawal. These are very valuable messages to the industry. I'm sure everybody is tuned in. So with the permission of Shri Agrawal, we'll get into the main session, which will be now moderated and taken ahead by Mr. Rakesh Nangia. Rakesh ji.
Thank you, Agrawal sir. Thank you for sharing your views about this industry and the government support which has come for it. But we are going to discuss some more minute points, final lines, and we will like to have your thoughts and inputs also on that. So we have some 3 core topics, which we will discuss today, which will touch the entire ecosystem of the AC industry. We are going to discuss the nuances, the challenges, the incentives, the opportunities, the expectations. We are also going to discuss the global scenario. Where does the AC industry is and where does India stand in the global scenario is concerned? Just a couple of things which I want to add to it, which was discussed in the first part, is that 90% of the bill of material of air conditioning industry is presently covered under the PLI scheme is there. The challenge we have today, how to grow this AC industry to 24 million units by 2030 from current 9.8 at the CAGR of 13.8%. How do we transform this AC market? Little bit more to add what was said in the first part by Mr. Jawa. With the India heading for 5 trillion economy, with the increase in the per capita income, urbanization, higher disposable income, this is likely to change or transform the air conditioning industry. For my viewers, before I go to some very specific point to my panelists, for 1920, the trade deficit on HS code 8415 of air conditioning was to the extent of 864 million, basically. This is just to share where we stand in this whole industrial scenario is concerned. Hence, there's a need to establish AC manufacturing entire ecosystem within India to initially cater to the domestic market at the first and also to make India as an export hub. So in summary, the sector offers huge opportunity and PLI is only one of the means to take it forward. Now coming to some questions, sir, my first question will be to Mr. Jawa, sir. Now basically you have been mastering this thing. We have to build plants, we have to build the capacities if we really have to touch the AC market to 24 million units by 2030. My question to you, is industry ready to take the plunge? Or there's something which is holding them back or something you're expecting from the government to come forward? What are the challenges and opportunity you think and the capacity, basically building up capacity in near future or till 2030, sir? Mr. Jawa, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Nangia, I think, when we went to, it's a very, very interesting question, I must answer. When we first met Mr. Batra, before we met actually Mr. Agrawal, he had put up the same question that, if China is actually making 140 million units and you are making only 4 million units, or the sale is 7 million units, what is the problem? Why are you people not making investment in India? And why is FDI not coming? So when I sat there with him for 15 minutes, tea, coffee, the meeting ended up with lunch and long 2 hours meeting. I told them that, these are the issues. And one of the major issue was that because out of 7 million which were being sold in India, 3 millions were coming from China. So I must thank Mr. Agrawal here, because when we discussed with him, we told him that, this is what the problem is. And I don't know what he did. How did he take us to Commerce Minister, or how did he manage with his own bosses there, with Mr. Jain, etc., etc. And one fine morning, I can't see the more courageous step than this, when the China imported air conditioners were banned. So suddenly that 4 million went to 7 million. So that encouraged the manufacturers to start thinking in that direction, that we should be putting up more plants. And then we actually went to Mr. Agrawal also telling that, why in India manufacturing is not there, because 25% only components are being manufactured here and 75% are imported, and these are the reasons. So he and him were, like he said, he did not mention, but I think we would have had more than 30 meetings with him at a short notice. It was both ways that, we were demanding and he was over demanding, I would say. But this was a jugalbandi of a perfect cooperation or a collaboration, whatever you may call it. We showed them that if, the 65,000 crore is only domestic from 16,000 crore, also 35,000 crore exports, because, 0.6% only in India. When in India, you have global scale of, R&D centers. Most of the companies have put up, which my colleague will tell you also that, Johnson Control Chief is sitting here. He has put up a global R&D center. So I think with this PLI initiative, if you look at initiatives directly targeted at air conditioning sector, have given impetus to air conditioning industry plan of expanding local manufacturing in India. I must share with you that for PLI scheme only, the 42 manufacturers have actually committed investment, or some of them have already made investments, To name a few, people are sitting here, Amber Electronics or Blue Star Chief is sitting here. Havells has taken a land in Shri City. Daikin has taken a 75-acre land in Shri City. So they are committing to new plants. They're committing to expanding component manufacturing, including the PCBs and the compressors, which the devices nobody thought of. Can you imagine that, India is so small that no one really actually looked at compressor manufacturing. So when these discussions were happening, we gave them a point that we are at a tipping point of air conditioning demand in India. With increasing urbanization, with rise of median incomes and consumer preferences, also for making the product a necessity, and in concert, capacity has to keep the pace. However, considering demand projection from 2025 to 2030, if government impetus continues to be positive and this kind of jugalbandi continues, we are confident that perhaps a lot of new investment, new plants will be required to meet the demand. And that's what the industry request has been. That, maybe some of them did not realize that this kind of a response also can come. So potential of the market has always been there, and we are seeing this potential being realized now.
This is really encouraging, Mr. Jawa, to note that. My next question is to Mr. Gurmeet Singh ji. The global technology centers, center of excellence, these are integral part of any industry, basically. And these are initial elements, actually, in terms of qualitative output. And obviously, without R&D and other things, you cannot produce a good product. Where does, and you have to meet these ambitious targets, compete with the global companies. These are essentials requirement, ingredients, I can say that, for qualitative manufacturing. Where does India stand for? Is there something more India needs to do, or is something government needs to do more? What is the scenario, current scenario in India?
So, Rakesh ji, thanks for this question, because we started off with infrastructure in manufacturing and of course the component. But I must take a minute to just say this, that from the time this was conceived by the DPIIT and this was put forward by the industry and cooperative, industry today, from the time 2 years back, today is very much ready for manufacturing and supplying. For the annual demand of 24 million, as you have said many times, in a couple of years' time, let's say 7 years or 6 years' time. Now, investments are being done. Plants are being put up. There are some investments, as we've already heard, being done, will be done. Capacities are being enhanced. And every company which is having, let's say, 2 lines is getting more machines inside, all of this under PLI and otherwise. I think we will find that the import content will surely come down and the infrastructure is there. But the basic problem which you've touched and you asked me is on the designs. Now, if we were to manufacture everything and still get a design from outside for India, this is a big challenge. So what we have seen is that there is a, extremely high desire and will from various manufacturers and developers to put up these centers. Just to name a few, the multinational as well as Indian companies who have done this investment. People like LG, Samsung, Panasonic, Blue Star, Daikin, Hitachi, Lloyd, all have started developing the air cons from India. So many times, previously, even while it was being manufactured, the basic design was from outside. And I can tell you this is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. You have to hire engineers. When we set out as Hitachi to get some engineers for our design center, which we put in 2019, to fulfill the 200 jobs for those engineers, to get them was a difficulty. So how do you get them? You get in there. But each of them also costs a lot. Let apart the building and other things, the labs and the infrastructure inside, almost like 200 crore, 100 to 200 crore cost. Now, I must say that there is a huge push on that. Many development centers already come up and many of them are coming up. And this is one for India. But more importantly, there is an export of product and there is an export of design. Indian development centers coming up for many multinational companies are actually developing the designs for the world and sending it out. Some of them, these products, we will bring under this PLI to India, manufacture in India. But for now, these development centers also producing designs, making designs for, let's say, Europe or a Middle East or an Africa to be produced in those markets. This is the big thing. So the only thing which I want to request the government is that we need to look at how do we support these investments. We are supporting manufacturing. We are supporting component. How do we support this? This is the core. How do we do that? And till some time back, we were having 150% income tax relief on a investment that we used to do on R&D. That also has been withdrawn. So the disability that we have now, probably when we started this scheme, this disability has come back and added. While we get something in let's say 6% or 5% in the PLI, this has gone away. So Agrawal sir, please consider how do we take this also forward and take it to the next authority.
Sir, I would like to make one more request to Agrawal sir. Sir, this R&D incentive is everywhere in the world. It's not only we are asking in India now, basically. It is there. Every country in the world promotes R&D. We had a weighted deduction under the tax laws. We requested Revenue Secretary, I requested the chairman for extension of that beyond 2021. It has not come in, but this is an incentive base actually. It's not India is only asking it. And here a research is the key element, is the core of my industry, sir, in terms of efficiencies, in terms of power consumption, in terms of quality of the output. So, sir, we will request, sir, because you at the level can take it much more better than what we can take it as individually is concerned. Mr. Menon, I have an interesting question to you. For the market is concerned, we are talking buoyancy of the market. We are talking about growth, 5 trillion, urbanization, industrial clusters, everything coming up. Everything is on the demand. And you have to kill the, sorry, not to, you have to see the imports don't kill the domestic market. What needs to be done? How the market should expand? What we need to do that to meet this growing industry demand is concerned with?
Yeah, Mr. Rakesh, so as Mr. Jawaji mentioned, the current penetration level in India is currently at a measly 5%. So whereas China and rest of the world is upwards of 60%. So there is a huge opportunity for us here because of the large upside that is available from 5 to say 25 or 30. I think that's a clear upside available. And this growth from the current level of 7 to 8 million to 24 million by 2030 essentially translates into a CAGR of roughly 14 to 15% growth year after year, which is to my mind, very clearly possible with the kind of support that we are getting from the government, the kind of schemes that are being rolled out, the kind of collaborative efforts that Mr. Anil Agrawal mentioned just a while ago. I think this is a real jugalbandi. So there are one or two interventions which can still accelerate this growth. For example, if you just step back and see, for this AC category, what are the key drivers to this to growth? There are three important drivers. The first one is the cost of the initial purchase. That means the affordability of the air conditioner for a middle class user. The second is the running cost, which is this power bill, the electricity bill. And the third one is availability of power from the perspective of smaller towns. I'm talking about the non-metros, the tier 3, the tier 4, and the tier 5 towns. Now, on the initial purchase cost, I still feel that on the affordability front, especially because of the commodities, the freight costs going up, there has been a significant increase, 10 to 15% over the last year itself. So there is indeed a big challenge from a middle class consumer's ability to buy an air conditioner. It's certainly, despite the EMI schemes, etc., this still remains a challenge. And my request to Mr. Agrawal is just a request that, unfortunately, even today, this is a product which is taxed at the highest rate of 28% GST. A correction to something like 18% can make a huge difference in terms of middle class user being able to afford the air conditioner. All the more in the context of the inflation that is going on in terms of the commodity prices. The prices are now really jumped by almost like 5,000 to 10,000 compared to 1 year ago. So people have limited budgets in terms of what they can afford. The second and the third points in terms of running cost, I think, is being very well addressed. The Ministry of Power, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has had a graded step up of the energy labeling. So today, for example, the energy labels in India are the best in the world. And so the consumer also ends up paying much lower power consumption, power bills compared to what he would have 10 years ago. And I must thank the Ministry of Power, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency for such a wonderful scheme. So that is being adequately addressed. So the running cost, I think, with today's models are certainly affordable from a middle class perspective if he's able to control the usage, I would say. The third area, again, in the last 7 to 8 years of this government, I think hats off to them, from being a power deficit country to being a power surplus country. The availability of power across the country has been fantastic. And I think this is also going to hold us in good stead. So the request from a home buyer segment would be only one to Mr. Agrawal, is this GST reduction to 18 will make a huge fillip in terms of growth for this industry. There's a second part to this, which is the other users, which is the government and public sector unit users, which use it for the offices, etc. What we've noticed is a large number of government institutions have air conditioners which are more than 10 years old, and they are guzzling power because they were the non-rated air conditioners. If the government decides to have a scheme where they can have the government institutions to buy new star-rated, especially 5-star rated air conditioners, it will do two good. The first one is the industry will get a fillip in terms of traction. And secondly, the load on the power grid will significantly reduce to almost to the tune of 50% of what is being used. So this is another request to the government, whether they can consider replacing air conditioners above age of, say, 10 years. That means pre-2012. If this can be done, the industry will be indeed very grateful.
Yeah, in the interest of the time, actually, we have a lot to ask, I know, and I'll accelerate the process. So another thing which is there on the export part is concerned, I think India, we are targeting to have 16 million units of export by 2030 now, basically. And today, I should dismal record in terms of export, but this shows underlying opportunity. It shows potential if strategically right initiatives are taken. So I want to spend time on a few minutes on this. How do we achieve the export target of 16 million tons by 2030? And my first question to Mr. Jawa is this: free trade agreement. Thailand has been a huge success, actually. UAE is yet to be deciphered, yet to be there, basically. And we have 7-8 FTAs in same name are continuing going on. What is the benchmarking, the best international practice as FTA is concerned? Do you think these new FTAs will actually help us in achieving this thing? Or there will be a tussle, challenges, difficulties meeting this thing?
Mr. Nangia, actually, you are asking very interesting questions, which have also been discussed earlier with the DPIT. So maybe some of these are look like that I'm answering to DPIT. You know, first and foremost, this whole process of PLI application was very fair and efficient, and we look forward to returning the benefit to India with expanded manufacturing and in-housing components, which is what was the desire. So, you know, they had demands and we had demands. So, you know, it was a synergy both sides. Coming back to new trade agreements and benchmarking, we have been following developments on FTA fronts. You know that with 8 countries, the discussions are going on with a great interest because we have been able to establish our credibility, and Mr. Agrawal himself has seen many of the plants, physically, that we have the scale, we have the capability, we have the capacity, and we have the R&D centers. And, we also want to applaud the government's initiative to strive for trade without barriers. I'm in no doubt that air conditioning can be a game changer, like in automobiles, or mobiles. You see yesterday's statement of Suzuki chairman that, if their 50% of the profit comes from India, I mean, they have been exporting Baleno from here. This is the desire of Mr. Vikram Kirloskar of Toyota. This is the desire of, Honda. And this is what we want to replicate. So if you look at the benchmarking to other countries, research and development in AC technology earlier was a weakness for India. And like my friend has asked, despite these weaknesses, because we have seen some hopes and people have put up global R&D centers. In addition to Johnson Control, the LG, Samsung, Daikin also has put up global R&D center in Nimrana. And now we are putting up one more with the 25 test labs because we know that India can actually produce a product for exports. So I think if barriers to trade are eased, which the process has started, there is nothing stopping India from becoming an export hub, impacting positively trade balance, the country and the local employment generation. And we are excited to bring AC manufacturing to the forefront as part of all FTA negotiation and support in every way to increase engagement. Our only request to Mr. Agrawal is that, the industry engagement on these discussions should be, again, encouraged and should be more proactive. And like I said, automobiles, AC can also be the next product that India supplies to world at tremendous scale.
Thank you.
And this can also, the opportunity is again 0.65% to, we are talking only 15%,
Yes.
Which is 35,000 crores. So this can be a great employment generator as well.
So, coming to my next question, I think I have more to ask. Time is a constraint here right now. Gurmeet, I want to ask you one thing. These export incentive, duty-free imports of raw material, ROTAP, what are all these things? Do you expect more from the government? Is this working to achieve the objective which we are defining it here, basically, to reach to that level of production, to reach to a certain level of exports? Do you want more from the government, or government has done enough basically for that? What is any ask from the government on any more thing?
Yeah, so you're right. You see, the government has done enough. They are doing whatever we want. Probably it is there in the. You see, the export incentives are available. We have a new scheme, ROTAP. We have a duty drawback scheme already available. We have, both of them, which give a benefit to the exporter. But I think the ROTAP, what it replaced was another scheme, which is probably not as attractive as that. And it's, I would say, a little more cumbersome to claim, very difficult paperwork and all that. The way the government today is working is to reduce the burden on paper and make sure everything is very ease of doing business is the word. And we do talk a lot about the industry. Ministry also talks a lot about ease of doing business, ranking going up. Now, inside, there are these issues. So we need to probably iron out these rather than a new scheme. Possibly, I would say, a little bit of a insight into how we can make ROTAP a little more attractive. Now, that's one. We have also got a mover scheme, which is, you mentioned a very interesting point. Can we bring in duty-free components? Yes, we have a mover scheme,
Yes.
But it's, I think, a nascent scheme. Not many people have gone and availed that. We need to do that. I think if government can hold some workshops along with some agencies to train up our people and assist on getting it done, I think that will be a lot easier. It helps. It helps. Mover is a fantastic scheme. The only issue is that it is not fully, I think, still implementable. But my problem that I have recently got is the anti-dumping duties kind of thing which has come up. Now, anti-dumping duty, government of course has done its own work and decided that some categories should come under it. But these anti-dumping duties, I believe, are not claimable back. If the duty is coming on a certain product, how do I get it back when I export it? That's the problem that we are facing today. Can we get to a situation where these export costs are not burdened with these duties? This will all help, I believe. More than that, more than launching a new scheme, how do we make sure that whatever we have is either leveraged properly or maybe made a little more attractive?
Thank you so much. My question to Mr. Menon is this: challenges for the AC industry, competitiveness, globally, domestically, comparative analysis, if we do that basically. How do you see that as an India stand? Do you see it's a very big challenge, or something more the industry needs to do more, something more government needs to do more? How do you see this as a challenge to the industry is concerned?
Yeah, Mr. Nangia, while the PLI actually addresses the expansion of the finished good capacity as well as the component ecosystem, we still notice that there is a rough 8 to 9% disability with respect to China and Thailand. And this essentially comes from 2 or 3 important areas. The first one is export incentives, which are far more attractive in these countries. There's a lower cost of capital in some of these countries, which there are facilities for lower cost of capital in some of these countries, and a lower logistics cost because of the infrastructure that they have developed over the years. So these are the 2-3 elements which add up to that 8 to 9%. Now, I'm a strong believer that to achieve competitiveness on a global scale, other than the development of the local ecosystem, very important, the sheer scale of production, very important, and the journey has already begun. I have a feeling that as Gurmeet ji mentioned, with the mover scheme is a brilliant move of the government of India. This actually scheme offers import of capital goods with a deferred duty. That means till the time the machinery is not moved out of that bonded warehouse, which can be for 20 years if you wish to, you're virtually saving that entire cost of customs duty. You can even do raw material import till the clearance of the manufactured goods out of the bonded warehouse. Now, this is a scheme, as Gurmeet ji mentioned, not many people are leveraged properly. And I think this is a great scheme introduced in 2019 by the government of India. It is open to new manufacturing facilities. It is open to existing manufacturing facilities. It is open to exports. It's open to pure domestic companies. So it's a brilliant move. And I think with the mover scheme getting leverage, I think this disability on this cash flow capital thing can indeed be addressed. And our dream of moving to just a 15% share of market of the global market of 110 million by 2030. So we want 16 million, a very, very modest ambition of just 15% share of the world. I think this dream can indeed come true. And I'm very sure that if we need anything, we go back to the government, they will help us make this dream come true.
I can only add here, Mr. Menon, this can only possible, and the question comes, how do we boost the production? How do we create a world-class ecosystem? And how can we create economies of scale when you're competing with China or Thailand when we're talking about it? Now, to discuss this thing briefly now, I request my panelists because of constraint of time. My question to Mr. Jawa is this: MSME, what I heard, is playing a very important role in the development of the whole AC industry is concerned. When you see components, 90% plus components are coming under the PLI is coming. New product development is an essence. How I want to know about you from is MSME part, the contribution more. Do they need to be trained more? Do they have enough facilities? Can they turn out a better product? Something on to see that we are able to boost qualitative production, not numbers, but qualitative also, and competitive.
Yes, Mr. Nangia, again, while we were discussing this PLI scheme with the government, here again, we have tried to tell them that, MSME is actually generating a lot of employment. And MSME is important because the component manufacturing is only 25% in India and 75% the imported. So, they have been playing a very vital role in boosting AC manufacturing and providing competition and innovation in the market, particularly in component manufacturing. And if you look at it, the essence of this scheme is that we have given this benefit, mainly the disability factor is being addressed for the component manufacturing.
Yes.
It is not on the finished goods. Although the industry was wanting in the beginning, but they reconciled because they believe that hand-holding with MSMEs and growing together as partners, ensuring timely and in some cases advance payment to MSMEs supports their growth. And these should be industry practices. So in fact, on training by itself is a key component of building the ecosystem. So one side, we are building the ecosystem for the components, which is compressor or PCBs or other small components. The other is training, which will enable and sustain envisioned growth. So as an example that, Daikin Japanese Institute of Manufacturing Excellence, which is an initiative aimed at skill enhancement at all levels in air conditioning and will be capable of providing more than 150,000 skilled manpower to the industry in coming years. So I think a model of private-public partnership for training and mentorship will be a welcome initiative. This is what also request has been given to the government and is a necessary step to upskill the ecosystem on training front. As far as the boosting the MSME is concerned, government also realizes and the industry also realizes that this is a very, very important aspect and we should be supporting the MSME and we are working on that.
Thank you so much. Gurmeet, I have a question. New product actually, development is an essence actually. How is industry placed today? Because new product, quality product, I've been talking about it again, but you have to have a new product development as an essence, as an essential part actually, when we have to reach to these targets which we are talking about it, whether it's production, manufacturing, sales, domestic sales, exports. How is industry placed today in this part as the Indian industry is placed?
Fortunately, I'm getting a question which I've already answered basically on the centers that I talked about, development centers. But anyway, so let me tell you the large markets today for let's say the room AC or a split AC we do, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, they are all large markets. And temperature wise, we are not very far from that. So I must say that whatever products we have for India, with a little bit of tweaking here and there, we can definitely get best quality products. The challenges are usually to match the the regulations of those countries. So what I have experienced in my tenure as an exporter from India, whatever a small bit we've done, that with a little bit of tweaking of our products which we are existing for India, we get to do a large number of them. The only problem which comes is the scale that we export, and therefore the regulations that we do or approvals that we need to take. Having said that, the labs that we need to test according to the standards of those countries and other things, and the various certificates that we have to take are required. But basically, the labs we are adding on, and there are international testing labs and companies which are available here. So this is relatively easier. So just let me give you a small insight on how many SKUs we make. We make 106 different models in India for Hitachi, I'm talking about. Now, if you look at the entire gamut of the entire bandwidth of manufacturers, I think we will have 1,000 models. In a desire to go and make new products, you can always do that. But whatever you do today, the basic thing is that you have to extend it. It should be scalable and modular, and it can extend to those markets. When we start thinking that way, the development becomes a lot easier. I think that's what's important. But I think more important than that product, I think, each of my, whenever I've answered, I've made a request to the Dr. Mr. Agrawal. Now, here is the issue. Now, this is a softer issue. It's not a very technical or a industry type of issue. It's a softer issue, and this is on Make in India label. The label of Make in India today, and pardon me for saying this, when you talk of engineering goods, beyond, let's say, automobiles or two-wheelers that we export to Africa, the Make in India label for engineering is not a very, very highly appreciated label today in the world. Now, it's only a question of perception. How do we help, how do we get this help from the government, in which the popularization of this Make in India is done through various, media promotions or whatever thing we do? I think that's what is the brand Make in India through some export councils needs to be promoted. That's equally important as much as product is.
Thank you so much. My final question to Mr. Menon for the session today is, we have a lot of challenges on logistic infrastructure in India, and they could be the impediments in the smooth transition of moving forward is concerned. Any your thoughts? What are the biggest challenge? Do we need to make some requests to the government? I know there are a lot of challenges on infra, but the government is working seriously on it. But what are the important, let's say 3 challenges, infra challenge or logistics challenge? And we request Mr. Agrawal on these things where we need government intervention.
Let me try to address all the issues that have come in. First of all, it has been a very enlightening discussion. And some of these points we've also heard a number of times. So, like for example, designing in India. So that issue it is already flagged, and we are addressing that issue. In fact, if you see in MIT, there is a scheme for design in India. So there is a PLI scheme which is coming as for design in India. So we are, open to that idea, and that is very much the centerpiece of all our interventions that is going to be there. In terms of GST, GST, the difficulty is government alone can't decide. So we need to take all the state governments also together, and there is an exercise which needs to be done for building consensus across the country. So that is all. Now, this suggestion of the old power guzzlers to be replaced by the newer machines, energy efficient machines, work has already started. We are in talks with the industry, and in fact, last time when they discussed, we suggested, can you come up with an EMI kind of a scheme where the savings in the power bill could finance the repurchase? Can you come up with a scheme like that so that it becomes a little more, easy on the pockets of the institutional buyers? So that is something that the industry can have a look. Of course, I think you must have seen government is proactively reaching out to industry on all the FTAs this time. So whenever we are, like for example, when we went in for an SEPA with UAE, on all the tariff lines that we are giving out concessions, we went out to all the industries, they took their opinion, and when they said, these tariff lines are not to be taken, they were not offered to the industry. So I think this is something that you must have seen. Government is actively working on this. So whenever there is an FTA, if air conditioning industry is affected, you can rest assured that we'll come back to you before we take a position on that. And our position is very clear that we don't want to permit finished goods under FTAs. It's only the components or the raw materials or the intermediates that can be permitted. So that is, I have noted some of the suggestions on ROTTEP and the mover scheme. So let's see how we can, I'll take it up with the concerned people and how we could probably do it better. And of course, the anti-dumping duty can't be, reimbursed. So by design, it is something that can't be. I wanted to say one thing about the Make in India label also. We are in advanced stage of developing a scheme where Made in India label will have the domestic component and the quality. That will be, we are designing it as a national scheme where Made in India label could be given to different local contents, depending on, what is the local content and the quality standards. We are also working on a very comprehensive quality assurance system. We are also into, a market surveillance system. For regulated products, how do we ensure that the quality of products sold is as per the regulation? Now, today, if we have a license issued by BIS to some manufacturers, if you just take 1 or 2 samples, it may not suffice. We probably need to take more samples from the market and not from the manufacturer to ensure that the quality is there. You may also be interested to look at the trade surveillance where, counterfeit products are being sold under your brand, and that needs to be checked. So there are important things that we are looking at. And this is something that is extremely important from the point of view of assuring quality to the consumers that finally goes. I had an interaction yesterday with Bureau of Energy Efficiency. They have a project by UNIDO on innovation in energy efficiency. So one of the sectors, and I was very impressed to see some of the startups which actually presented their solutions which have been selected and by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And you know, this is you, I mean, nobody knows this better than all the stalwarts of the industry, that innovation is a primary requirement of staying in business. Better efficiency, better productivity, it will come from innovation. Have we actually looked at identifying the talent that is available in this country? Have we tried to challenge them with the problems that we are facing? Have we tried to support them in what they are doing? And looking at some of the solutions that are already there, which are validated by experts in the electrical engineering field. So, you know, I suggest that RAMA as an association, you know, you should develop an innovation program as an association. So by that, what could be, you know, actionable could be, you identify some of the problem statements that you need to resolve. You know, it could be energy efficiency, it could be so many things. You would know it better in terms of technical thing. Can we have that challenge thrown out to all the students, IITs, triple ITs, and you know, NITs, in engineering colleges, across to all the startups, entrepreneurs? Have a look at those solutions that they are throwing up. There could be some which could actually potentially develop into commercial products. And you know, this is what the major brands in India now need to look at. I would strongly suggest develop a program for engagement with youngsters, the young innovators. That is another, you know, very, very important aspect of government's policy to support entrepreneurship and innovation under Startup India program. And I would suggest all of you to develop a, you know, tangible program which has tangible means, and you know, we can support you in how to design that program, how to execute that program. But I would suggest that that is something that industry should be looking at. You talked about skill development. Of course, PPP in skill development is very much feasible. We are doing it in so many other sectors. Air conditioning sector we can look at. I don't know if you have an air conditioning sector skill council. Do you have a sector skill council? If you do not have do you have a sector skill council? No.
No, we don't have.
Well, so think about creating conditioning sector skill council. And then we go to the Ministry of Skill Development and we say, look, these are the courses that we need people on. And then we develop courses, and then we, you know, support skilling in for the entire industry. It will be helpful for the entire industry. We've done it for all the labor intensive industries, which are like, for example, leather and footwear. It is being done. We are now thinking of textiles and so many other sectors. So this could be, you know, a higher level of skills, and this is eminently doable. Please think about this. So these are my suggestions. Remain open to receiving more suggestions, irrespective of the short time of this particular session. We are always open, and always open to taking feedback and seeing what best we could do for the industry. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. It has been wonderful hearing from you, your thoughts, government intervention, government support, industry. The stalwarts are here today, sir. And hearing you, it give us so much of confidence. Yes, we are heading in the right direction. My only thing which just struck me, I want to share this thing. Challenge should be how we break China and Thailand dominance by the end of this decade. This is just came in my mind. I think we all the whole industry is here, bigger industries here. With you, government as a government support, sir, I think, yes, we are in the right direction. We are making a right move, actually. We are moving, at least. We are thinking and we are talking. We are taking action. We are doing it. Government is supporting us. A little bit of government support may accelerate the process, sir, where we are able to break. And India becomes number 3 in the world after China, Thailand, and India in this decade. I'm not giving you more time. So it has been most wonderful discussion. I think we could have talked more because industry people can talk much more. But it has been really, really wonderful, sir, hearing from you. Thank you, everyone, sharing your views, thoughts, and we are free to take with the government forward. Mr. Bhuvanesh, sir, back to you, Mr. Khanna.
So why don't we have a last word from Mr. Jawa, Mr. Sethi?
Yes, I wanted
one short word each. It's been a beautiful session, and thank you, Shri Agrawal, for your wonderful time. You've been very benevolent, and we see a great supporter for our industry in you. Over to you, Mr. Jawa.
Before I give my final comment, I salute Mr. Agrawal with both my hands.
Oh, absolutely.
For his openness, for his transparency, and always listening and also giving answers then and there.
Yeah.
So speedily exit. We welcome, sir, the initiatives of Gati Shakti and the progressive investment announced in the budget this year. Swift implementation of the projects like logistics parks, increased highway and rail connectivity, etc., will expand reach further in tier 2-3 markets and reduce overheads. A great hope rests upon logistics and infrastructure investment by the government, sir. And I can certainly see that as vision of Gati Shakti comes towards becoming a reality, the benefit will start pouring with the AC business ready also. With the world looking for China plus one strategy, India now has the opening to integrate itself in global chain as well. You have addressed it very nicely, sir. We didn't have time to explain to you about the copper, the aluminium, how you have addressed the disability factor versus China. I will brief Mr. Nangia later. But let me tell you that, those are the things which are bridging gap in positioning of the most preferred manufacturing destination globally. I'm sure that, if the kind of support which you have been giving, we can together create the market, grow the market. Thank you very much. Bhuvanesh, I will stop here because of the paucity of time.
Yeah, I'll just have a short word with Mr. Sethi. Anything that you want to say, Gurmeet ji?
So, enough has been said, but I only have one last word for Mr. Anil Agrawal. I was wondering, in the agenda, we never had this time in which Mr. Agrawal will come back and revert on the issues. But it is his hallmark, whatever panel we have, whenever we've gone, if we raise something, he has noted it down, see the intent, he notes it down and replies. So this is the beauty of this gentleman. And only thing which I would say, and many of us who have dealt with him directly and many of us who have heard about him, is the speed that he works with. The speed and the action is something that all of us must have read in some textbooks, not really visible usually, whether it is a corporate or government or even my home, everywhere.
Mr.
Dr.
Menon,
Agrawal, salute to you. Mr. Agrawal, salute to you.
Yeah.
So Menon, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just a few words. I echo the thoughts of Jawa-san and Gurmeet-san. So especially on Mr. Anil Agrawal, the short session addressing those 4 or 5 requests from our side, absolutely spot on. And most important, that energizing inputs which we got at the end of the session in terms of that engagement with young innovators, the AC sector skill development. So we are really grateful to you. Thank you for your inputs.
First and foremost, on behalf of President Rama, Vice President Rama, and the industry, I extend our sincere thanks and gratitude to Shri Anil Agrawal, Additional Secretary, DPIIT, for so readily giving his consent, not only for organizing this webinar, but also sparing his valuable time to be the chief guest and to deliver the keynote address. Your views and advice has always been well received by the industry. You have been very supportive of the industry, as Gurmeet-san just mentioned. We extend our thanks to you for playing such a stellar role in driving the PLI scheme. And we look forward to your continued guidance and support. I now thank our panelists, starting with Mr. KJ Jawa, President Rama, and CMD Daikin, who mooted the idea for this webinar way back in June, July last year. Thank you very much, Jawa-san, for leading the efforts of AC industry in conceptualizing an effective PLI scheme based on market insights and data-based analysis. Your mantra, create the market, grow the market, will perhaps be a huge motivating factor for the industry to make India a global manufacturing hub. And your dictum, country first, industry second, and company last, could well be a new paradigm for corporate ethos. We are very grateful to Mr. Gurmeet Singh Sethi, immediate past President RAMA, with vast industry experience, for so graciously coming on board the PLI webinar despite the medical condition and hospitalization of his father. We are thankful for your views and advice that you have shared. I thank Mr. Mukundan Menon, Vice President RAMA, for his valuable thoughts and ideas shared during the webinar. RAMA has immensely benefited from his long-term strategic vision in formulating the industry's approach in implementing the PLI scheme. Thanks to Mr. Anurag Batra, Chairman Businessworld, for collaborating with RAMA on this webinar and putting all his resources at our disposal. Mr. Rakesh Nangia, having wide international business exposure and extensive knowledge of various facets of PLI, has moderated the webinar in a very seamless manner. Thank you very much, Rakesh ji.
Thank you, sir.
We take this opportunity to thank Mr. Bhuvanesh Khanna, CEO Businessworld, for coordinating with us over the past 1 month. The 7 p.m. coordination meetings, which we were pushed into at half an hour notice, have indeed proved very useful today. Last but not the least, our thanks to the behind the scene team for very effective pre-show coordination. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ashish of DPIIT, Mr. Praveen Mahindra, Member Executive Committee RAMA, Mr. Harshvardhan Pant, Secretary RAMA, for their advice and suggestions, Mr. Anuj Mangla and Dr. Biswajit Roy of Daikin for their cooperation and inputs. And lastly, Mr. Ajit, Salman, and Tanvi of Businessworld for the entire creative efforts and marketing efforts, and Mr. Preetam Pandey of RAMA for the enormous secretarial support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Shri Anil Agrawal, for your time. Thank you so much.